Hey folks, I've got another review for you today, and this is in the form of Nitecore's latest release, their TM26, TM standing for the Tiny Monster series. But before we get into this light itself, I figure it'd be worth doing a quick run through of some of their notable products throughout their history. Now, if you don't care for this, you could fast forward to the time frame mentioned down in the caption below. But first off, I like to just highlight one of my very first Nitecore products. This is the Nitecore SR3, which was at the time one of the very first magnetic control ring lights out there after the Surefire U2s, that is. And it featured 7 fixed output levels, or 6 fixed and 1 strobe, depending on how you programmed it. So it still remains one of my favorite gems of all time. And that, because of that, I haven't flipped it or sold it. Next up, it wasn't until the Tiny Monster series got kickstarted with the TM11 that I got exposure to yet another Nitecore product. This at the time was one of the most compact, highest output for its form, that is, at the time that it was released. And then after that was the Nitecore Sense series, which featured a accelerator that could actually detect the angle that you had the light in and then adjust the output accordingly. And this came in 3 flavors, which was the tiny little CR2 cells, CR123, and then a AA cells. And then finally is the Nitecore P25. If you haven't checked out my review, please do so. I cover it in depth. But again, it just to highlight some of the very unique products that they've been putting out. And of course, now we get to the star of the show, which is the TM26 itself. Now, before we dive into that, the TM26 did arrive in this box, and it provides the specs. As you can see, there's 3,500 lumens, which is quite notable. And I did revise my output testing. I know that due to the cost and the claims, figured it'd be worthwhile to really challenge the claims that are being put out by this light. So I will have a separate deep dive video covering that. But to finish off the rest of the specs here, it's 1,000 hours max on the lowest setting. It could cast a beam out to 415 meters because of the 43K CD candelas. And then finally is impact resistance to 1.5 meters and water resistance to 2 meters. So the light did come with additional accessories, which included a card, the instruction manual, a little packet that features a little wrist strap, a spare O-ring, as well as a spare charging port cover in there, as well as a 12 volt 1 amp, this is the US version outlet, charger. And of course a holster that is pretty much the same as the one for the TM11. Getting into the designs and features of the TM26, the most notable is that OLED display, OLED standing for Organic Light Emitting Diode, and these are becoming much more prevalent because they're very energy efficient and they're also designed to be flexible. So in a future iteration, I actually wouldn't be surprised to see the display mounted perpendicular to the light itself, as well as around a round curvature, because they can be bent. They are flexible, unlike standard LCDs. So it gives you multiple readouts. First, when you first turn it on, it'll indicate which level you're in and cycles through the voltage currently, a estimated battery meter, the runtime, as well as the internal temperature of the light. Now, it will only cycle through that display once, but at any point you can actually manually cycle through it by depressing the button to go through it. Now, one thing I did want to touch upon is that this voltage indicator is pretty smart. It's actually reading the current state of the cells, the voltage I should say, including the voltage sag. Now, to demonstrate what I mean by this, if I bump it up to level 3, this obviously has a higher current draw and thus corresponding voltage sag on the cells, and you'll see there's a decrease in the voltage. Likewise, if I bump this up to level 4, you see the voltage sag is even more, and now it's down to 3.96 volts. Shut it off, it'll indicate the standby, and as you can see, because there is not that much draw, it's just whatever the OLED display as well as the standby of the MCU, it's showing 4.03 volts. Now let's go ahead and bump that up to turbo mode. 3,500 lumens, huge sag on the cells, as you can see, bumps it back down to 3.71 volts. So overall, it's very intuitive. I like the fact that it actually shows you, the corresponding voltage seg depending on the level you're in, so you get a real idea of just what the voltage is in actual use, because this will really help you be mindful about keeping your cells healthy. A lot of the times, the low voltage indicators kick in a little bit too belated. I mean, most of the times I've seen in the lights, it's usually down to like 3 volts or something like that. So this would really help you to keep an eye on things. Now, skipping off that for a second, coming back to the head of the light, as you can see, this is the 4 quad XML U2s, and it does feature that 4 brush stainless steel bezels that I suppose is removable with the right tool. And as you can see in the reflection there, all of them are nicely AR coated. Now, these reflectors are actually not all that deep, right, or that big at all. By comparison, the recent light, the P25, this gives you an idea of just how big the size difference is. If I'm not mistaken, I've measured these at about 23 millimeters, or roughly just a little bit over 3¼ inch. Yet, despite this, these 4 can combine to pump out a throw of 43K candela. By comparison, the NITECORE P25 was about 20K candela. Now, to give you an idea again of just how small these reflectors are, this is Surefire's E1E, which is just a tad bit smaller for the inner diameter as opposed to the TM26's reflectors. But again, it's just amazing how much throw this guy has, as well as how it is able to actually consolidate the 4 beams into one nice tight hotspot, which I will get into later in the beam profile. We'll do a deep dive there. Now, skimming off that for a moment and getting back to the head itself, there's actually 4 flat sides. It's almost like it's an octagon, but a weird octagon, right? So you got 4 large flat sides in the form of a square, and then each side has a diagonal cut into it. So it does provide for a pretty good anti-roll, right? And then on each of the 2 sides that runs perpendicular to the OLED display, there's obviously the TM26 QuadRay. Now, just for the record, I am dubbing this Nitecorezilla. I was thinking about Quadzilla, but that's actually already been taken by, I think, one of those ATVs. So Nitecorezilla, because this is currently their highest output light, into it gets replaced by something else. The other side does feature their website, their company name, and at the bottom here we find the charging port. There's a rubber flap as well as a tripod mount, because this does pump out 3500 lumens. It can be used as a fixed spotlight. So now the rubber cover is just simply, you just peel it away to access the charging port, and when it's not in use, just make sure that you plug it back in. It is affixed by a screw, unlike the P25 though. So, and it is replaceable, as mentioned earlier. There is a spare provided, and there's just all these additional cuts around the throat of the light, so that I suppose helps with heat dissipation. Now, speaking of heat dissipation, this light does feature an internal thermal control, such that if it hits 60 degrees centigrade, it will kick in to step down the light into L4. Right now, this light, as with the most recent light, does feature a 2-stage electronic switch, in the sense that there's a half press so that you could cycle through the modes, as you can see there, and a full press to shut the light off, or from off turn it on to get into full turbo mode. But again, I'll get into that in the UI section. Now, the switch is surrounded by a clear rubber cover, so as you can see, there is a blue LED behind there that also gives various indicators. Currently, this is just the beacon indicator, but it will also blink to indicate either errors, or as well as, I guess, when the charging is complete, it'll stay solid. However, it doesn't do voltage reading like the P25 does though. But then again, you won't need to, because you have that. Now, the tube itself is exactly identical to the TM11, save for the actual imprint of the model name, but size, dimension-wise, every little detail down to, like I said, other than the model number, it is purely identical. Now, just to prove that point, here is the TM11 barrel side by side, and as you can see, in all regards, it is identical. And they are actually interchangeable as well. Case in point, here's the TM26's battery tube on the NITECORE TM11, and the TM11's tube on the TM26. At the tail end, there is a milled machined hole so that you can insert the included wrist strap. And then finally, as you can see here before, This is a flat surface that does allow it to tail stand. The TM26 can come apart in two pieces with the battery tube as well as the head itself. This is pretty much, again, very much identical to the TM11 with the notable exception that there is no version number currently on the board, whereas the TM11 did actually feature the version numbers as well as updates to those numbers as it went through its iterations. Now again, just to give you an idea of just how small this TM26 is relevant to the TM11, since the battery tube is the same, this is really the only difference that you're looking at here. Of course, the black background doesn't help, so I'm going to put my fingers up a little to give it a little bit more contrast, but again, you can see that overall it is a very, very compact light, especially in consideration of the insane amount of output it is capable of pumping out. Now, for those who may not be familiar with the way that the battery arrangement is, this circle right here is actually the contact point for all of the positive tips of the cells. So the use of flat top, and by flat top what I really mean is an AW2600 that literally does not have any raised edges or a protrusion. So it literally is just perfectly flat. Those type of cells typically would not work. So you would need at least a cell like these ready glass here that does have a slight raise to them so that it can make contact with the positive points. Now it may be a little hard to tell due to the high contrast lighting situation, but those threads are square cut. However, because they are very fine, you definitely don't want to be cross threading them. As you can see, once you insert the battery and you engage the tube, it does cycle through, displays Nitecore's name, the current voltage, as well as the that is in standby mode, as well as again the voltage reading yet again. Now peering into the base of the tube itself, you will see that there is a single solid copper piece down there with cutouts that look like leaf springs basically. And there is this block here so that you wouldn't be able to use, let's say, a single 26650 size battery instead. Now all of the batteries do go in the same direction, with the negative towards the leaf springs and the positive tips towards the head. Again, they run 4 cells in parallel, but because of this arrangement, it is, if you're in emergency, it can run on a single cell, although of course they advise you not to do so because for protection of the light itself as well as the cell, because it is a pretty high drain light, especially in turbo mode. You can, of course, run anywhere between 1 to 4 cells, actually. Now, the TM26 does also have the option of running on 8 CR123A primaries or 8 RCR123s. Fit and finish. So, with the light costing $399 MSRP US dollars, that is, obviously it's going to get a lot of scrutiny because people have to decide really. That's a lot of coins to plunk down for a light, regardless of all the innovation features in here. So I'm planning on being extra critical with this. The stainless steel bezel is pretty much standard. There's really not much you can do to get wrong here. They are brushed. The anodizing is pretty much flawless. Okay, and again, you will see that there are none missing in between the grooves, which are again common problems with poor anodization process. You will also see that there are none missing on the sharp corners. And again, nothing missing between the grooves. Now, if there was one point I could pick on about the anodization, like I have noticed with the TM11, the threads do seem to have certain tidbits, just very, very minute areas missing for whatever reason. Right? So as you'll note, there's a spot there. And there's a spot there. Now I don't know if it's like a machining issue, but again, that's something I would like to see them improve upon. Now likewise, on the base of the light, it seems very solid. There's no way that you could disassemble this, at least that I could see. So it just feels rock solid like a brick, this piece. I could probably take a gander that you could run this over with a car and it would survive it pretty well. That's pretty much how solid it is. No, sorry, I'm not going to entertain any requests for that because I do still have quite a bit of testing to do with this. Now, rounding out the end, so again, overall fit and finish is really solid. If I had one nitpick about this light, it would be this size switch, right? This one in particular, and perhaps is limited to my sample, I don't know, since it's the only TM26 I've handled, the activation is not as crisp as on the TM11 or P25. It sort of has a very slight spongy feel like I first experienced on a early version of the TM11. So what I mean by that is kind of like the detents, right? I don't really get, it's just slightly spongy here, right? So I don't have that nice base where pretty much on the P25, if I reach the base of the soft press, it's very distinct to me. Whereas this, it's kind of like, because it does push back a little harder, I don't have that nice crisp feel. The full press is the same, but it's the half press that makes all the difference in the world on this particular switch. So again, I don't know if that's limited to my sample, but it's something to keep an eye on. This OLED display. Now OLEDs, if you don't realize, they are very sensitive to water ingress, water damage I should say. As you can see, this is bolted down with 4 hex bolts. I do plan on probably taking that apart to see what's underneath there. I'm positive there's got to be a gasket there, obviously, for water resistant purposes. Another concern would be this charging port, whether this little simple rubber flap is sufficient to prevent water ingress. So that is something I will be testing as well. I will also be testing the heat capability of this light, again, to make sure that it does step down at 60C. But however, though, if you've probably likely seen Patriot 36's review, you will see that he did conduct that test and it did in fact step down appropriately. But I have quite a bit more testing to do to ensure that if you are going to plunk down $399 for this light, that this is truly all that it can be. User interface. Now, for those who have seen my P25 review, you'll know that I am a huge fan of the UI on that light. But because the TM26 does feature one sole switch versus the P25, which had a additional mechanical tail cap clicky, it does function a little bit differently. Pretty much as soon as you screw on the battery tube, this light is in a perpetual standby mode. Now, to engage it any output level, you soft press. It's currently on level 1. I don't have the exposure lock because this isn't about showing you the output. Again, it's about covering the user interface. I do have a dedicated beam profile and output section layer. Now, again, half press to cycle to level 2, cycle to level 3, and level 4. Now, level 5 or turbo mode is actually locked out. In the sense that it's not part of this sequence, right? You actually have to shut off the light, give it a full depress to activate turbo mode. Now the reason for that, I have to imagine, is because for safety issues, right? You don't want the light to overheat, although it does have thermal built-in protection, but plus not to mention, you really don't want to activate 3500 eye-searing looms in the middle of the night. So, but however, if your job just so happens to be that you do happen to have to activate 3500 lumens ASAP in the middle of the night, again, it's just a full depress. It's just that, again, it's not part of this sequence, L1 through L4. Now, the secondary mode is activated with the light on, again, soft press, and then 2 full depresses, okay? So that goes into a fixed rate strobe, and it cycles through a SOS mode. And then lastly, a locator beacon. Now, that secondary mode is not memorized like on the P25. Pretty much only the output levels are ever memorized. So if you were in L2 and you shut the light off, the next time you activate it, it'll go back into L2. Turbo is obviously, again, never memorized because it's not part of this L1 through L4 sequence. Now, one thing I did want to call out is that this 2-stage electronic switch can actually function like a mechanical clicky. So in this sense, right, instead of depressing and then letting go immediately, if you actually depress for at least 1 second or longer, it kind of goes into a momentary mode. So you see how I'm pressing soft press, let go, soft press, let go. Likewise with the turbo mode, a full press, let go, full press. So again, you can see it does activate in a momentary mode as well. Now, with this being the sole switch, there is concerns of accidental activation, especially with a soft electronic switch like this. So in which case you could activate the lockout feature. Now, how that's done is with the light on in any mode, if you press and hold, you'll see that it flash lockout. Now, regardless of how you press the buttons, full press, soft press, it'll just constantly remind you that the light is locked out. To disengage that, again, you press and hold, and it'll re-enter the last memorized state. Or another way is, if you enter lockout, just unscrew the tube, turn it back on. That's it. It disengages lockout. Overall, I like this user interface a lot as well because, again, with a single hand operation, you could activate any mode, right? So you can activate L1 through L4, or shut off the light, activate L5 instantly, use the light in momentary mode by depressing and holding. Likewise for the turbo mode, depressing and holding, or to enter lockout, press and hold, and likewise to get out of lockout, press and hold again, and as well as activating secondary modes and cycling through them, all with the one thumb. Now there has been some concern raised about the 4 separate distinct LEDs and what that would do to the beam profile, but rest assured it does converge very, very nicely into a nice hotspot. As you can see here, it doesn't even require too much distance before that happens. And again, it's just amazing what they did with these 4 tiny little reflectors to put out the type of both output and the throw that it is capable of. Now, whatever dramatic range shifts you see here that I'm seeing on my LCD screen, at least, it's not noticeable in real life. So again, I'm in the process of finding a new camera to do videos with that would hopefully be more true to life to again improve these videos. Now by comparison, here is the NITECORE TM11 on my left and the TM26 on the right, so you can see how the beam profiles stack up against each other. I'm trying to keep them about the same distance, and it's no wonder they call the NITECORE TM11 the flood monster, as you can see, whereas the TM26 just has that really nice tight hotspot. Now, it may seem like the TM11 is more intense, but that's because this is on the lowest setting, this is on L2. They do not correspond with each other right now, so don't take that as a apples to apples comparison. It's not. This is just to give you an idea of the beam profile, not necessarily the output. By way of another comparison, here is NITECORE i30 on high mode. That's the only way to get all 3 LEDs to engage, and the TM26 on L4. So again, this is more about the beam profile, and you can see there's a lot of the concentric rings cast by the 3 separate reflectors, whereas it's completely minimized on the TM26. And last but not least, here is Sunwayman's T60CS on the left and TM26 on the right again. And again, this is just to give you an idea of the beam profile. Of course, this is very limited right now in terms of the distance. It's literally on my desktop, so I will try to get comparable shots outdoors to show you a real world view of what these beams look like when they finally do have a chance to converge. In terms of the beam angle, as mentioned, because the beams do converge very nicely, it's pretty tight overall, with some flood, I should say, but obviously it's no flood monster like the TM11. So currently the light is on L1, as you can see. I'm shifting beams around, you can probably see that, right? Exposure is fixed and locked. This is L2, L3, L4, and L5. I have quite a bit more testing to do, but in summary for now, Nitecorezilla, I am very, very pleased that you have joined my stable of lights. I definitely look forward to testing this some more, but again, this is an amazing light for its capability, especially with the features. Of course, OLED, you may say that it's gimmicky or whatnot, but I do find those features very useful, especially with the fact that, again, it doesn't just indicate the voltage of the cells, but also the voltage sag as well, as you can see there, and an estimated runtime. Now, obviously, that's taking into account that the 4 cells are running in parallel, and the fact that it's accounting for the, you could say, the average of those 4 cells, and it is able to give you an estimated runtime based upon that, right? Again, the user interface, like I said, very easy to use, one-handed. You're going to cycle through the 4 modes, shut it off, activate turbo, shut it off, activate secondary modes with 2 quick presses, cycle through, oh, see, there again. So that was, as I had mentioned previously, about me not feeling as well about that, the sponginess of where the hard stop is. But again, sorry, to activate the secondary mode, 2 full presses, and to cycle through them, or to lock out the light. Again, all done with a single press of the thumb, right? Now, Nitecore has continually been pushing the boundaries of the features that they've been including on their light. So the fact that they've included a little nice tripod board so that it can be used as a spotlight for those in search and rescue, I suppose, or who could probably even use this, like I said, you know, even construction use or whatnot. The output is just amazing, especially for the form factor. Now, of course, the next logical step is that it would be nice if they had incorporated a Bluetooth receiver transceiver in here such that you could actually control this light remotely. So perhaps a little Nitecore app on your iOS or Android, and you could remotely activate your light. That would be just awesome. Provided that suggestion already, I don't know if it's ever going to get incorporated, but that would just be way cool. Especially if you could have another little Bluetooth mount here to the tripod so you could actually swivel it or whatnot. That would be pretty awesome if they could incorporate that. But anyways, as you can see, I am quite taken with this light. However, though, in consideration of the price, as mentioned, I will have a bit more follow-up because I've only had this light for a short period of time. There is extensive testing to do. I will cover follow-ups in my full written review. I will also have, again, separate videos that I will test the thermal capability of this light. Of course, another deep dive on the charging, as well as perhaps comparo versus other lights, and of course outdoor beam shots as well. So that concludes this review, and as part of FTC disclosures, the NITECORE TM26 was provided by Nitecore for review. Thanks again for watching.